Detectorist here, and we've come to show you some things about old Woodstock, where Woodstock began. Our interest began because both of us lived on the Captain Samuel Stevens place, and this was one of the first places down on Black Brook. It was later sold to Abel Bacon, and then it went to his son Herbert Bacon, and then it went to Ralph Bacon, and from there it was sold to our father, Walter Scott Emmons. And they bought it in 1946. That was the year I was born, so they brought me to the farm, and that's where I lived until I grew up and left home.
Yes, and I remember when I was about 5, there was a really bad lightning storm, and the bad thing about these New England farms, everything is connected. And it had a barn full of hay, and it hit the barn, and it just quickly spread. And I can remember sitting in a car, I was probably 5, out by the road and just watching. Everybody came, and they were just going in and out and trying to pull anything that they could from the house to save it. Because back then they didn't have insurance. So, you know, the house and everything was lost. But this was the last of the original of the Stevens Mills homes that was left. And this is a family picture, and we wish to donate it to the Historical Society. Take some of the big stuff here.
Well, we might also want to tell them a little bit how we just kind of happened to start in doing this. We just decided that we were interested, because we had always lived down there, to kind of go around and, you know, we got us a couple of little metal detectors, and we thought, oh, we'd have fun. We started, you know, carrying out all this junk, and we're going like, well, what is this and what they use it for? And then our curiosity kind of went to who lived in these cellar holes? You know, what was the name of the families? And so it just kind of evolved into that until we just kind of like, we almost got to know the people with how they lived and some of the tools that they used and what their homes looked like and where they were situated. And sometimes you could find things like, you know, plants or shrubs or something growing that they had grown. So it became an interesting kind of a historical jaunt, and this is where we started.
Yeah. And so this is a pretty good cross-representation of the people. They were farmers, they worked the land, and that's a lot of what we find. Once in a while you do find something pretty. So, what do you want to start with?
Well, this is just a big old stove door. You can see it's pretty ornate. I never did find out, you know, who was manufactured by, but it was just pretty, and so, you know, you lug that off the mountain and you're tired by the time you get home, but that's just kind of a pretty piece.
Some of the heavier stuff, we'll just leave it up here and you can look at it later. The little things we can pass around.
And this was another door, came off the mounting. I think this one might have been, it looks like a door that might have been like in an old beehive oven, like when they bake their bread.
I think so.
Because it has a handle on it, and it looks like it might have been able to be opened.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was N.P. Richardson, and this was a Portland, Maine manufacturer. And this I figured to be mid to I don't know, maybe a little late 1800s. It's an old andiron. I couldn't lug it home, but my sister lugged it home for me.
So that was made in the blacksmith shop down there?
I don't know, it could have been. And this one I found quite interesting. You know, it's not just a plain, ordinary horseshoe. As you can see, this side looks like a normal horseshoe. But look at this other side with a roll up. Well, I got to asking around to someone who had been familiar with horses, and I said, well, was this a mistake, or, you know, what happened? He said, no, he said if a horse had had an injury or something to this side, they would have rolled that up, so, you know, it would take the pressure off in his foot. So, I'll pass this one around, you'll have a look at it.
And another common thing we find quite a lot, plow horns.
Heavy.
I have notes here somewhere too, some of the stuff. this here is a hand corn planter, and they had the, of course, the corn factory, and the farmers would commit a certain amount of acreage for the corn factory. And this one here was patented May 15, 1883. And it would have had a thing on the front here for the seeds, and they could just walk along and plant. Let's see. And it goes scythe.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them you might find possibly a name on the back. And this one here was called the Clipper. And it was manufactured by G.N. Nolan of Skowhegan, and they were in business from 1879 to 1899. And this is one of my favorite chains, just because it speaks of the person, speaks of a Mainer, it speaks of making do with what you got. This is a chain, and as you can see, all the different pieces and parts and little doohickeys, all kinds of different chains that this person put together to make something that worked. For an animal.
Yeah.
And I found this was interesting. I found this down by Black Brook, not too far from the old brickyard. And what I found out, because it did have a name on it, was that it was made by the Ferber brothers of Saco. And what this was the top part of an old hand pump. The handle went down, it had a long wooden handle, but these were attached to a water pump that they made, and they made it from a great big log that they had drilled out. But this was the top fixture on it. And this is another horseshoe that's kind of like, did
Look
they
at the
really
nails.
use nails that long in it?
I can't believe what they did.
I feel sorry for the horse.
I did too. And this is just another part of what's left over from a sleigh runner. And this I suspect was an old, probably a barn door hinge or something. It's a real heavy duty one. And this I'll always wonder about. I found it not too far from where we live, which wasn't too far from the old Ezra Stevens, or the old circus grounds. But this was a curry, and it was really fancy. It had a brass piece on another one there, and I'm thinking, well,
Kind of a hat design.
yeah, and it had a hat design. It was really pretty fancy. And I was wondering whether it was part of something left when the circus came to town and then left, and they had lost it. And of course, we always find a lot of old jackknives, every description you can imagine. A lot of them with the wooden handles and some.
Yeah, and the wood handle ones, they're probably 1850s, 1860s.
Yeah.
Look at them. And then here is just a couple examples of some hand forged items, and a nice hook, nice handle. Yeah, they do.
And of course, every find wouldn't be complete unless you found some silverware about at every site. A lot of them had been burned, they've been in fires, and you find knives and forks and spoons, and some of them are pretty unidentifiable. Then along the way, I found this old Ford Model T, Model A hubcap. The old roads are pretty tough on them, so I'm sure that got beat off and run over in the process. And this is, I found this radiator cap, and I'm not even still today sure what kind of a vehicle it came off from. I will pass these around.
And this here is a double range force bit, and it was approximately 1866 to the 1900s.
most of us, especially down there, seems to be, there's ox shoes of every size and description that you can imagine. And even this one looks like it's even got a bit of old brick fired onto it. And this is what's left of somebody's old wrench. It probably could have.
You've got a couple of them upstairs.
And axes, double bit axes, regular axes. I find axes.
Everywhere
Lots.
we go, she finds axes.
Lots of axes. And this here is a Civil War era canteen. And it would have had straps all the way around, and they would have had a stopper. And this one here, if you look, it's got like a hole that goes through it. It kind of looks bigger on the outside. Could it be? That almost looks like a little stab there. And of course, the ladies always had to get their work out. They had their sat irons, and this was a later one. They would have had a handle that would have clamped on here so they could have more than one heating at a time. This one is Sparrow Steel Co., and it was patented July 12th, 1898. Your earlier sat irons would have been flat, and the handle would have been attached. But they're very heavy, like heavier than the axe. And this here went to a pallet stove. And it's got pretty little grapes and leaves on the sides. He always tells me turn it over. And they would take out their pallet stoves a lot of times and push it back, and they had this cover so they could cover up the hole from where the pipe went through.
These are a couple of the glass objects. This is jadeite, and I think it must have said flour on it. And this is a little hazel Atlas salt shaker. And of course, I'm always picking up, you find your pretty pieces of glass, and they're just too irresistible to bring because they're pretty. Send this a salt.
This one here is a Dr. Walker's Vinegar Bitters, 1866, and it was during the temperance period. And it actually contained 7.5% alcohol. And they said that it was really thick and brown, so they had a label that pretty much covered up the whole bottle so that people wouldn't look at it, I guess. And throttle bells, those are always pretty nice to find. They would have them on the horses. This is their horn, so that people could hear the horse in it. And a lot of times they have different designs on them, and some of them will have a number on them because they were different sizes, different numbers. And we have a little sap spile. Heel plate. She actually found one they actually had winter ones, and they were a lot like the horseshoes. They had the little rolls on them, so they had winter ones as well. And this here, I don't know what is, but I did find it on the circus grounds. It's hand forged, twisted. It goes one way and the other. And I brought a jackknife. This one here would have been a bone, and there's not much left of that. And I had to bring a couple of the old square nails. See some of the nails, and look at this one when he tried to nail it in. Split.
And I have another nail here. This one I found down by the old Captain Samuel Stevens Dam on the brook. This is a really big, heavy.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Of course, when you're out looking for things, you always find plenty of old whetstones. I've got more of those, with, sharpening their tools and their hand size. I found a couple of old pocket watches. This one here, it's probably maybe early probably 1900s. This one here, I suspect might have been a gold-plated one. There's a little bit of gold on it, but There's no back, no front, but it's interesting. I also found this little piece. It was broken, like it had probably been stepped on or run over, but I suspect that it was a napkin ring, a silver plate. And my favorite of all is this Victorian sash buckle that I found. It's a two-piece, yes, and it was in just a perfect shape.
And this here is a colonial shoe buckle. The colonial would be late 1700s. And we always find a lot of different kinds of buckles because all the animals they attack and stuff, they would have a lot of different kinds of buckles and sizes, and we find a lot of buckles, a lot of brass buckles. And this here, we have a little Victorian lady's hair comb. They would have had a couple little points here, and they do the hair up, up there. And this is a bridal rosette. It had like on the side with a horse. This is a very delicate little buckle set. It's got a very pretty design. It would have gone together like this.
This spring we came up with this interesting find from one of our places that we have funded before, but never happened to find this. This is a Civil War era 1863 Indian head penny, which had been drilled for somebody to use, I'm suspecting for a necklace or something. And knowing the history of that cellar hole, who lived there, we suspect it might have belonged to one of them that had actually fought in the Civil War. Because in the Civil War time, I've learned just recently that they didn't have dog tags, and a lot of times they would take these and wear them, and a lot of times they would smooth them off and put their initials something on. So if something happened to them, somebody would be able to find them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. This is a little antique doll that was given to me by Ralph Bacon, and it belonged to the Bacon family. It was an heirloom. I'm not sure which actually person it belonged to in the family, but it is an heirloom which I'm going to donate to the society. So I think it should be here.
Oh, wow.
And we've had fun because the old Black Brook brickyard is on the property that I now own, and we've become interested in kind of studying that. And it was kind of like, I'm going to say probably in the 1820s and on, that they made a lot of bricks there. The banks are all, there's quite big banks that have been all shoveled out, and there's a lot of big clinker piles there. And I have an example of the old bricks. The old bricks were a lot wider than the ones they made later on. And as you can see, they're very porous. They have marks on them because they had wooden molds that they made them in. And this one here is one that I found it's a later one. It's one probably from some of the last kilns. And even in Samuel Stevens, when he sold a piece of property, he had leased to I think it was an Otis Swift, 2 kilns of bricks that this person could have on that property, even though he sold the property to somebody else. And that they had made 2 kilns of bricks of 200,000 bricks. And this here is an example of what the clay looks like. My father went down to the brickyard and he got some of the clay when my folks had the old County Road ceramics. and he brought it back and mixed it up and actually molded it, and they fired it. So this is actual
Same stuff. as
same
that.
stuff.
Same.
So much iron in it, what makes it so red. And even sometimes when we're metal detecting, some of the bricks have got so much iron in them that they show up on our metal detectors.
Oh, yeah. 1965.
And the most awesome find,
Nobody's seen this yet, you guys are privy.
you're gonna see it first. I don't believe there will ever be one just like this.
There won't be.
And we were really surprised to find it. Was looking for things, and I'm going like, hiding, there's something on this. Well, you got it out to the light where we really could see it. And what it is, and we'll pass it so you can see it, but this is a tally brick. It has numbers in the brick all the way across, and then a line at the bottom where they added it all up. This was some man tallying up his work for the day or the week or for somebody's order, but there is no other one like this. This is somebody's work.
This was his paper.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
paper.
It comes out, what was it?
Scratch it in.
1,675, I think, bricks.
Wow.
So we'll let you guys look at it.
Pin
And,
scratching on it.
yep. You never will, but I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
I guess that's a conclusion. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, what kind of metal detectors do you have?
We have bounty hunters. I don't remember, 3,300 or.
Yeah.
You
Middle
were
of the
walking down the
ground.
road this week? I saw two women with metal
Probably.
detectors
Probably.
walking down the road, and I thought,
Yeah, it would have been us. And
did other properties burn? Was it like a big fire that destroyed other farms?
Oh, yeah, yeah, like the one up in the Pines, the Whitman place, that burned.
Yeah,
A lot
At
of
the
them
same
did.
time that this one burned?
No, different
Oh.
times, different times.
Different times.
Yeah, a lot of them did burn.
I think a couple of them, it appears that they were repurposed.
Mhm.
When kind of the old farms, some of them got abandoned.
One of the things we did find, we always go up to the library, do research, and we're searching, trying to piece together some of the things, and Welcome Kinsley was one that had a, what was it, hotel down on
Hotel
Stevens
store.
Mill, yeah, on Stevens Mills, and then you had Luther Whitman up in the Pines, and they talked about, and you actually have a picture down here that shows the parlor with the landscape pictures, and we found out that Welcome Kinsley also had landscape pictures. And they sold that to Luther, and he moved it up to the Pines. So that's where those came from. It was one and the same. He had taken the hotel, moved it up there, and repurposed it. They did a lot of moving, a lot more than what we do today. They'd hook on the oxen and away they'd go.
Yeah.
Roll it on logs or something, right?
Yeah,
A lot of the building here in the village came
Yeah.
from Pinup,
yeah,
because they moved them over from Pinup.
yeah.
The old oxen, boy, they worked. Amazing.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
This was probably 3 years of us going out.
And sometimes you come back with nothing, but maybe a couple nails.
A
You
lot of
spend all-
times you
spend all day
dig
on
a
the
lot
mountain.
of junk.
Yes, you do.
Bug bites.
Or bug bites, ticks.
I think we did it separately for a while, but then she moved back up, and then we just started going out together. It's better to go with somebody,
Yeah, right.
beat off the bears or something.
It's porcupines,
Ticks.
ticks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Those things are awesome.
Yeah, feel free to come up and look at them.
Where about
Thank you.
Where did the hotel sit down there when it was operating?
I think it kind of up behind where the Carries are, we think, kind of up there,
That's where the Carrie building.
up back,
Kind of
up higher.
Behind there.
That's where we're thinking.